Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am Michelle Walker Wade, author of the book, The Discipline of Kingdom Advancement, and I am also the person who will be taking you through this time of teaching and learning about the discipline of kingdom advancement. I want to first start by thanking all of you for joining me during this teaching time, and I would like to thank again everyone who has purchased a hard copy or an e-copy of the Discipline of Kingdom Advancement. I want to thank you from my bottom of my heart for making your purchase and for joining me at this time. We are going through this time of teaching and learning, and we've just completed chapter 1, where I introduced the book and explained the purpose of the book and who it's written to and why I wrote it and what are some of the common themes you will see in the book. And today we are starting on chapter 2. So if you have your book, let's turn to chapter 2, and it starts on page 7. If you don't have your book, why don't you go ahead and pause the teaching for now. Jump over to Amazon.com, BN.com, Books A Million, Smashbooks, or iTunes, and pick up a e-copy of The Discipline of Kingdom Advancement. All right, so let's get started on chapter 2. So the title of chapter 2 is Discipline, the Act of Training Your Soulish Man. That's the title of chapter 2, which starts on page 7. Discipline, a topic we don't really like to talk about too much. Discipline, the act of training your soulish man. And I'm not going to read the entire chapter, even though it is a relatively short chapter. I'm not going to read it, but I will read just a little bit at the beginning of this chapter, and then I'll talk and share about some things. Then I'll talk and share a few things from within the chapter, and then also some additional thoughts and things for you to consider. So I'm going to start on chapter 7, on page 7, just reading just a little bit. Generally, discipline is a 3-step process. First, you're taught which decisions and choices will lead to a particular outcome. Next, you are trained and retrained how to make the decisions and choices that will result in the attainment of the desired outcome. After that, you'll acquire an innate tendency to make the right choices at any given moment in time. Of these 3 steps, only one of them can be taught to you by a person other than yourself. And that's step number 1. A teacher, ministry leader, or mentor can do their best to explain and discuss situations with you, hoping you'll accept the lesson and will apply it to your life. But it's not until the opportunity presents itself that you'll be able to put that teaching into practice, and that is training. This is where we find out if you can handle the pressure of making the right decision. What will you do if it does not work out as expected? This time of training is actually self-training, is critical to your development. Discipline is self-developed, and no one can go through the training process or the training period for you. By definition, discipline is a training that develops self-control or character. As you experience and acknowledge the joys of right choices, you develop wisdom for living in a way that protects you from the consequences of wrong choices. This satisfaction leads you right to step 3 of the process, and that is the acquisition of an innate tendency to make the right choices at any moment in time, and I call this wisdom in the moment. So as you go through this process where you have learned the things that you need to be able to say or do, or even in some cases feel about circumstances, that is a time of teaching. And you can be self-taught. You can learn from books or mentors or online resources, or you can learn from a live teacher. I'm teaching you virtually, but if we were in person, I also do lots of live teaching. You're learning from me through live teaching. And then even in the classroom or in the teaching setting, I may give you a activity, a learning activity, or a scenario. It could be a role play. It could just be anything that causes you to kind of move and really think about how you would apply what you have been taught, or what you have learned just from teaching, just from receiving knowledge, just from gaining and understanding. There'll be a chance for you to apply what you've learned. And that could happen, like I said, and during the training time or during the classroom session. You apply it so you can see what it's like to actually do, be right in the moment of practicing, doing what you have just been taught. When you start applying what you were taught, this is when we shift to training. I say in the book that no one can train you. We can teach you. We can share information with you. We can help you with your understanding to a certain level. But then the training portion, when it's time for you to actually do something, it's when your mind and your body engages in an activity that allows you to learn it actually for yourself, and not just based on the information that someone has given you or has shared with you. And that is the training. That is the training. And again, it can take place in the learning environment, or it's even more effective when it takes place after the learning environment. We do it in the learning environment so you can practice, and we can kind of help coach you along doing something, so that when you go out into the world or to your workplace or to whatever it is, your first time using the knowledge isn't in a real life situation. It's in something that you have been not only taught, but trained. You have trained to prepare for this time. And then when you get to go out and do it, it's not completely a new activity. When you have received this training, this teaching, and you have accepted this training, and you've put this thing to action, and you've done it enough, it's just become a habitual part of your life, or a habitual part of the way you respond to a certain opportunity, or to a certain set of stimuli, or then it becomes an innate part of your life. It becomes an innate tendency. It becomes your knee-jerk reaction to things, even if it was not earlier on, even if it was not initially your knee-jerk reaction, because you have been taught, you understand that when I do certain things, these are the outcomes I'm expecting, these are the outcomes that I want, and these are the ones that I get when I respond, or when I do this thing in this way. And I like the outcomes. This is a goal I set, I worked it out, I tried it, it worked the way I like the outcomes. So now it becomes an innate tendency, an innate part of the way you do things. It becomes your knee-jerk reaction because of the joy of the consequence. You did not suffer something you didn't want, but instead you received the reward, not the joy of the consequence, the reward. Yeah, the joy of the consequence, because of the reward that you received from doing the right thing. It's the joy of the beneficial consequence that you receive from doing, from acting out in a way that you were taught to do, or that you learned and decided, I want to do this because I like the outcome. It's the outcome I'm looking for, and it's the outcome I'm expecting. So in the book, I give a couple of different definitions of discipline. I just read one to you, and that is discipline is the training that develops self-control and character. A little later on in the chapter, I explained that discipline is the act of training your mind, your will, and your emotions. And in the book, I call it your soulish man, which is your mind, your will, and your emotions. Discipline is the act of training your mind, your will, and your emotions how to habitually respond to internal desires. Sometimes the things that we want is an internal desire. Something we want internally that's not going to get us the end outcome that we want, but it's an internal desire. So I'm training myself how to respond to my internal desires and external influences, things that happen outside of us, that are outside of our control. People do things, people say things, surprises happen. That's an external influence. The external influence often quickly impacts your internal desire and you respond to it. All right. But when you're disciplined, especially if something, this has habitually been a challenge for me. I always respond to this, to things like this, things that bother me. I always respond like this, and it's not working in my best interest. So you train your mind, your will, and your emotions how to habitually respond to it. Disciplining yourself is uncomfortable because you want to respond things, or your knee-jerk reaction to respond to things, you have to train it to respond to it differently. So discipline is uncomfortable. We're certain, however you may have grown up and been raised to be, maybe you weren't even raised to be, it's just part of your personality, but you say, you know what, it's not working in my best benefit. So you want to change that. It's going to be uncomfortable changing certain habits and behaviors. So just know that disciplining yourself is uncomfortable because it requires you to study your own behavior patterns. It requires you to take a critical evaluation of how you're thinking. It takes take a critical evaluation of your actions and take a critical evaluation of your reactions to things. This makes discipline difficult because you have to look at yourself in ways that you might not want to look at yourself. I don't want to critically look at myself, because I would rather, it's easier, it feels better in the moment to blame other people or other situations or other circumstances or my history or whatever the case may be, instead of looking at myself and saying, you know what, I'm going to study my behavior patterns. I'm going to study the way that I think. I'm going to study the way that I act, my reactions. I'm going to study that and see how can I change this so that I can get the outcomes I want, so that I can be more disciplined. So I asked some questions on page 8 and 9. And these are some things that help you when you're looking at yourself and trying to evaluate yourself critically, to see where and how you can change, so that you can be more disciplined, so you can achieve a certain outcome. So I'm asking some questions here. Starting at the bottom of page 8, I say, as a follower of Christ, you should make it a point to study your own behavior patterns. Think about how you respond to pain and jealousy or fear or disrespect. How do you respond when you feel these things? A lot of times we don't even want to acknowledge that we're feeling them. We don't want to acknowledge that we feel jealousy. Fear is kind of hard to not acknowledge, but some people do. But you don't want to acknowledge, I'm feeling jealous, I'm feeling fearful. Disrespect, we don't tend to have a problem acknowledging that I feel disrespected. But look at yourself and say, how do I respond when I feel these ways? How did you respond to your spouse or your pastoral leaders, and even to your coworkers when you don't like the way they treated you? How do you respond to that? How do you snap back at it? Or do you not snap back outwardly, but then you go someplace in the back room and do something passively? That's called being passive aggressive. When you respond in one way that's not really true to how you feel, but you internally plan a way to get back at that person. That's what you call being passive aggressive. And that's a really, if you are passive aggressive, it's easier to stay passive aggressive long term than it is to just be outwardly aggressive. Because when you're outwardly aggressive, the other person who you've been outwardly aggressive to can right there in that moment, if they choose to, or they can wait after a cooling down period, we can deal with it. We can come and talk about it. We can be face to face and talk about it. But when you do things passively aggressive, it's harder to pinpoint what has happened, and it makes it so that you can always be untruthful about the reason why you did something. You can always be untruthful about how you felt about something. And it's, the commandments are clear. The commandments are clear. Thou shalt not lie. So when you are passive aggressive, not only are you being, not confronting situations, not only are you acting out in anger, but you're also not being truthful and not being honest. You're actually lying. Okay, you're actually lying in your behaviors. Okay, how do you respond when you don't like the way they treated you? Do you consider your own actions first, or are you quick to criticize another person? Do you look at you first? Could I have handled that differently? Did I say it? Maybe I came across a certain way. I didn't mean to. I didn't really think that out. Do you look at yourself first, or are you quick first of all to criticize the other person? Okay. How do you behave when your money is in a short supply? We know some things about your character when you behave a certain way. If you're willing to cheat, if you're willing to steal, if you're willing to lie, if you're willing to play on people's emotions when your money's in short supply. Your money's in short supply, so you kind of call people like you want to talk to them and be like, yeah, girl, I just called to see how you were doing. Yeah, I don't have money for the bus and blah, blah, blah. Did you call me because you wanted to talk to me, or did you call me because your money's in short supply? So instead of coming straight to what it is that I need and talking about, my money is a little funny right now, and I don't really have money to take the kids. So I'm wondering, do you have any gigs I can do? Do you know of any gigs so I can get some money, or can I borrow some money from you if that's the case? And be careful with borrowing, okay? But the point I'm making right here is, how do you act when your money is in short supply? Do you play games with people? Do you steal? Do you lie? What do you do? What do you do? This says a lot about your character, all right? How do you behave on payday? When you get paid, do you spend every dime? Do you pay your tithes? Do you save something that you made, or do you just go spend it all on hair and clothes? How do you behave? Do you go out? Do you go spend it all out on entertainment? How do you behave? Are you a good steward over your money? This says a lot about your character, all right? And how do you respond to unexpected changes? This is big, especially when we talk about leadership. Your whole day is full of unexpected changes. It's just how it is. So how you respond to change is huge. And how you respond to unexpected changes. It says a lot about your character, and it says a lot about how disciplined you are as an individual. Okay, there are a few more questions on page 9. I said, when training your soulish man, okay, so you've got to train your soulish man. You've got to train your mind. You've got to train your will. You've got to train your emotions. You've got to train your soulish man, okay, how to react and respond. You've got to train your soulish man how to be disciplined. So when training your soulish man to remain focused, okay, to remain focused on what? What was my initial goal in the end? When I set out to do this, what was the end? What was the game plan? Where did I say? What outcome did I say I wanted? What was I going after? All right. When you train your soulish man to remain focused and to use wisdom in the moment, something has happened that I was not expecting, but I cannot lash out. I can't lash out. I can't quit. I can't give up. I can't fall out. I can't throw a temper tantrum. But how do I use wisdom in the moment to make sure that whatever my goal was, whatever my plan was, whatever it was I was expecting to do, whatever the outcome that I was going towards, how do I use wisdom in a moment so that even if I have to shift what I was doing, even if I have to come up with a new plan, I still know that's the end goal. I still know that's the plan. That's where I'm going. I'm sorry, not the plan, but that's where I'm going. How I'm getting there might be different. What do I do? Something just happened. I need to use wisdom. Someone said something to me that was disrespectful. I need to use wisdom in my response and my reaction to them. I thought that I was the A student. I found out someone else is the A student. How do I use wisdom in the moment to celebrate that person for being better at something than I was? All right. Okay. How do you use wisdom in the moment? There are some questions that you should ask yourself right in that moment that will help you behave and maintain focus, okay? You have to ask yourself, what is the emotion I'm feeling right now? What am I feeling? You have to identify, how am I feeling about what just happened, and be real with yourself. Be real with yourself. Don't act like, oh, I'm okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's not, if it's not okay, it's not okay. Be real with yourself about how you are feeling, what emotion you are feeling right there in that moment. And then ask yourself, how am I going to respond to these emotions and these feelings? So you take time not to have a knee-jerk reaction, but to say, okay, how am I going to respond? Because I have to maintain control. I have to maintain self-control. I have to maintain discipline. How am I going to respond? All right. And then another question is, how well will my response help me achieve my predetermined goal, that thing that I said I wanted in the end? Let's say I respond, I kind of just jump out and respond without controlling my response, without controlling my emotions. How well did that work out for me? Did it throw me off course? Did it make me end up with something, an outcome that's just not in my benefit? So what happened? And as you learn from this, learn from when you execute or manage your emotions well, and the difference between managing, what happens when I manage my emotions well versus what happens when I don't manage them well, when I manage my plan and my goals well versus when I don't manage it well. What's the difference in the outcomes? And as you do that and you experience the joy of having done the right thing in a moment of change, of unexpected change, you will begin to innately make the right choices. All right. So those are the questions on page 8 and 9 that will help you. Now, in Hebrew thought, okay, this part is not in the book, but in Hebrew thought, discipline and perseverance are similar concepts. All right, they're similar concepts. Discipline and perseverance are similar concepts. In Romans chapter 5, and I encourage you to at least read Romans 5, 1 through 5, but I'm just going to read a portion of chapter 3 and verse 5. Actually, no, I'm going to go ahead and read it. Romans 5, 1 through 5. My key scriptures, however, are in 4 and 5. All right. Remember, my point that I'm making right now is discipline and perseverance are similar concepts when it comes to Hebrew thought. Hebrew thought is where our Bible and our scriptures come from. So I'm going back to our native thought. All right. To our native thought of how we are living when it comes to being kingdom citizens. How we are living when it comes to being kingdom citizens. I'm going back to our native thought, or Hebrew thought. Okay, and I'm reading from Romans, which was not written in Hebrew, all right, but it is based on Hebrew thought, all right? All right, Romans 5, 1 through 5. Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Because we're justified by faith, we have peace with God, all right? Through whom we have obtained our introduction by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we exult in hope of the glory of God. Okay, so we've got faith, we've got peace, we've been justified by faith through the Lord Jesus Christ. All right, now this is the part. Not only this, but we also exult or glory, the word exult or glory. So I'm going to use glory just for, so I can make the point that I'm making. Not only this, but we also glory in tribulations. We glory in tribulations. We glory in tribulations. Why? Because tribulation brings about perseverance. It is through tribulation, it is through controlling ourselves in tribulation that it brings about perseverance. And perseverance, proven character. We have no idea what your character is until you have proven it through persevering or maintaining a disciplined stance through tribulation. All right. Proven character, and proven character, hope, and hope does not disappoint. When I operate in discipline, when I persevere through something that is challenging, that is hard, when I persevere through it, all right, when I persevere through it, it's going to build my character. And as my character builds, it's going to solidify the things that I hope for. Because I know if I just stick with it, if I just stick with what God has said, if I just stick with the plan that the Lord has given me, if I just stick with it, as if I just use discipline, if I persevere and do what I know to do right, I can maintain my hope that of the goal point at the end. That what I expect to receive, I am going to receive it if I persevere. All right, if I maintain. Now, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, if you haven't heard, the last name is spelled Lapin, he says, perseverance is the ability to follow your head rather than your heart. Perseverance is the ability to follow your head rather than your heart. And he's talking, Rabbi Lapin, he's talking Jewish thought. Okay, so I'm telling you how I'm bridging these two together. Perseverance is the ability to follow your head rather than your heart. The point that he's making is when you tell yourself, this is the goal, this is the plan, this is where I'm headed, this is what I need to do, and then you do it, okay? So your head maintains, this is what it needs to be, all right? Rather than your heart. Your heart is where the emotions, various things that come up, the internal desires that I talked about earlier, and the external influences that then impact your internal desires. Your internal desires come out in all these range of emotions that will always cause you to get off track. Your emotions will always allow you to get off track if you don't maintain discipline, if you don't persevere. So this is why Rabbi Lapin says perseverance is the ability to follow your head rather than your heart, to follow the plan, the goal, rather than your emotions. Perseverance, he says, is a spiritual strength. And although it is spiritual, it is strengthened just in the same way that physical strength is strengthened. The point that he's making, and this comes from his book, Thou Shalt Prosper. It comes from one of the latter chapters, I think like chapter 10 or so of his book, Thou Shalt Prosper. But the point that he's making is when you are building up discipline and perseverance, just like it said in Romans, it comes through tribulation. When you are building it up, the only way to become a more disciplined person is to continue to exercise that perseverance muscle. Continue to do it. Don't give in. He says, he lets us know when you give in to a pressure of something, to an internal desire or to an external, when you give into it once, it's easy to give into it again. It's easy. I said, I'm not going to eat French fries anymore. I did real good. Didn't eat French fries for a good 2 years. All I had to do was say, you know what? I've been good. I'm going to eat some French fries. And what happened? Then French fries became once again a normal part of my life, because as long as I held to no French fries, unless you fry them at home, all right? No French fries. As long as I held to that, I kept that perseverance muscle strong. I was building up. I didn't even have a taste for them. But the minute I said, oh, I could eat some now, and I let them a little more time, and I began to justify myself and my reasons for why I could do it and how often I could do it, then French fries became a part of my life again, because I did not maintain the strength. He says, although perseverance is a spiritual strength, it is strengthened. It is strengthened in the same way as physical strength. If you're trying to build muscle, you get those, you have to do reps. It's repetition, you know. That's going to build up muscles and whatnot. It's through repetition. All right. Okay. So that is discipline. Now, and discipline, perseverance. Now, back to the book, and we move on to page 10 and 11. And then the chapter ends on page 12. But as we move on to page 10 and 11, I tell the story about Simon Peter and when he cut off Caiaphas's ear. Now, I'm going to post a link to this, to someone who's teaching on this here in the YouTube discussion comments box. So that way, if you want to go and just listen to someone teach about what happened when Simon Peter cut off his ear, and kind of really set the stage and explain to help you understand what the fullness of what happened and how how crazy this could have gotten. You can go ahead and click and listen to the teaching, but it's also stated in the New Testament in John 18 and Luke 22. You can read those two together, and kind of it sets the scene. But pay attention to the fact that who all was there. Jesus and the disciples were there. Jesus was about to, he knew his time was coming. It was time for him to be taken away. He knew it was over. Simon Peter didn't want it to be over. He wanted Jesus to stay, and he didn't want anyone to take Jesus away and lock him up in prison and kill him and anything like that. So when Caiaphas came to bring the word from the priest, Malchus, Simon Peter did not like the word that Caiaphas said. So in anger and impulsiveness, even though Jesus had just told him that my time has come, he knew the time was up. Jesus just explained it to him. So even though he had been taught what was going to happen, and all along when he had been with Jesus, he had been taught and trained how to respond to various things that were happening as Jesus was walking the earth. When that moment came, it was in the Garden of Gethsemane. When that moment came, and Simon Peter did not like what he heard, he cut off Caiaphas's ear. That move alone could have gotten Jesus killed. It should have been an all-out war at that time, all-out brawl. Simon Peter wasn't the only one with a knife or a sword there. Everyone had something. So Jesus could have been killed before his time. All right. Simon Peter and all the disciples could have been killed. It could have been an all-out war. All right. Because if you read the story, Caiaphas did not come alone. He had all his soldiers with him. All right. So Simon Peter, he wasn't thinking. It was his emotions. It was those external influences of people coming in to say, we're taking Jesus. They got his internal desires all, as they say these days, he was all feeling himself. He was all in himself. And he cut off Caiaphas's ear. But Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, he knew he had to make sure that this situation stayed calm. He just picked the ear up and put it back on and told Simon Peter, you did the wrong thing. You shouldn't do that. And then Jesus went ahead and went with the soldiers who had come to take him away. I encourage you to read the story, John 18 and Luke 22, and for background, just so you can get the fullness of it, listen to the teaching. It is not an exciting teaching. The person who I'm going to share his teaching with, I'm sharing it because it's the most biblically sound of the many YouTube videos I saw restating this story. It is because I'm trying to just give you the story, not lots of excess. All right. So it is straight line teaching, nothing really exciting, but you will definitely understand what happened. So the reason I brought this story out is because there will be times when you are doing kingdom advancement work. Now remember, kingdom advancement work is God's character and your mission at work in the earth. God's character and your mission at work in the earth. That's my short definition. I have a much longer one, but that's the short one. God's character and your mission at work in the earth. When you are working out your mission, it's going to take discipline. It's going to take perseverance. You're going to have to control your emotions. You're going to have to exhibit self-control. You're going to have to exhibit character, and not just how you've grown up. And this is something we'll talk about in a later chapter, but the character of God is the one that you have to have on display. It's the one that you have to take on. This is a part of the discipleship process. It's taking on the character of God. All right. So it's going to take discipline to stand or persevere in the face of challenge. All right. So you're going to have to be able to do this. It's going to take discipline to allow God's character to outshine your behavioral flaws. When Simon Peter cut off Caiaphas' ear, that was part of his impulsive behavior. He showed there were other times in the scripture where we see he was kind of impulsive. That was part of his natural knee-jerk reaction. And so there'll be times, we're human. Our natural knee-jerk reaction will get in the way of God's character shining, but it is through discipline. It's through strengthening that spiritual muscle of discipline that God's character will generally, almost always, and as much as possible, always outshine your own behavior flaws. You need discipline in order to make the right choices and the right decisions, and to make sure that your choices and your decisions always focus on kingdom thinking. It's never about what's in it for me. Never ever should it be what's for me. It has to serve kingdom outcomes, kingdom mandates. It has to serve God's people, and it has to, even when you're serving God's people and when you're working out your mission and you're working out kingdom mandates and doing the things that Jesus told us to do when he left us here. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all that I have taught you. When you're doing that, it has to also be mutually satisfying to you in whichever vehicle God gives it to you to do. Okay, we're all not going out as preachers on the streets. Okay, and we'll talk later about how we do this, how our mission and the things, the work of our hands are connected. All right, our mandate and how they're connected. But as you're out doing it, you have to always know, I may be doing this thing and I'm serving others, but it also needs to be mutually satisfying to my needs. So when I go home after a day of serving the needs of others, I shouldn't be completely depleted. All right. I should not be depleted. I should, while my physical body may be tired, my spiritual man should be excited about having worked out my mission on that day. All right. And sometimes when you're working out your mission, oftentimes, if you're leading anything, if you're doing this work, you are going to come up against trials and tribulation. But remember, we saw that tribulation brings out perseverance, and perseverance proven character, and proven character brings out hope, and hope does not disappoint. Hope does not make us shame. All right, so that is it for chapter 2. We have covered chapter 2. We are going to move on to chapter 3. So I want to thank you again for joining me. I want to remind you again, if you've not gotten the book, if you've not gotten the hard copy or the e-copy, go ahead and grab it up. And after immediately following this teaching, please stay tuned and watch the 1-minute trailer sharing more about the book, The Discipline of Kingdom Advancement. Please, if this teaching has blessed you, please give me a like, share, make a comment on YouTube, my YouTube channel, or my Facebook personal page if you're a friend of mine, or on the Kingdom Walk Leaders Facebook page if we are not personally connected on Facebook. All right, God bless you so much. I love you in the Lord, and I pray you have a blessed day.
When most believers think about advancing the kingdom of God, they think about promoting heaven or their local church programs, rather than the life and love of Jesus Christ. When kingdom advancement is misunderstood, everything Christ taught us to do loses its potency, and the world begins to disciple the church. How can you change your life and the lives of others? How can you promote the kingdom in a way that will influence almost any unbeliever? Find the answers to these questions and more in Michelle Walker Wade's debut book, The Discipline of Kingdom Advancement: How to Move from Kingdom Talk to Kingdom Walk. This powerful book will help you transform your life and ministry by giving you the tools you'll need to advance the kingdom of God. Get your copy of The Discipline of Kingdom Advancement on Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com, BooksAMillion.com, or any of the sites featured on your screen.